I was halfway through my steak when Maya said it, calm as a verdict. "I've decided we need a prenuptial. Everything stays separate." The sound of her voice flattened the room. The cutlery's clink sounded obscene. I smiled because smiling is what men like me are taught to do in moments we don't understand, and the smile felt like a mask that might crack. Perfect timing, I thought. Then I turned that thought into action. I told them quietly, without drama, the thing I had already done. I'd pulled my name from the house deposit. Watching the reaction was like watching a photograph develop in slow motion. Maya's parents' faces tightened, shifted, collapsed into a kind of stunned arithmetic, $50,000, sliding out of their imagined plan. Their eyes moved between us, as if trying to read the invoice stamped across the table. Now I sit in my apartment surrounded by boxes of wedding things that are suddenly absurd relics. A veil folded like a soft accusation, invitations printed with two names that will never meet, napkins waiting for a celebration that evaporated. I'm 32, a software developer who makes decent money, and I feel lighter, which surprises me more than anything. Relief tastes strange, part grief, part release. We had been together 3 years, engaged 6 months. Maya worked in fashion marketing and made about $65,000 a year. I made roughly $140,000. Not a boast, just the ledger of our lives that mattered when we signed papers. We searched for months and finally found a house that looked like possibility. Solid bones, a worn charm, a waterfront address that felt like a future. The price was $420,000. We planned to put down 20% to avoid PMI, $84,000 total. The split had felt fair on paper. My $50,000 saved over years, her $34,000, $30,000 of which came as a gift from her parents, plus her $4,000. That math gave me 60% ownership, her 40. We signed the purchase agreement 2 weeks earlier. The deposit had to be in escrow within 10 days. I wired my $50,000 the afternoon I decided I wouldn't wait to be asked. The last 2 weeks blurred into a hail of negotiations and cold silences. Her prenuptial demand arrived like a verdict, then my withdrawal like a counterstrike. Words were exchanged that left bruises you couldn't see. Accusations wrapped in practicality. Love reduced to clauses and signatures. She called it betrayal. I called it preservation. Nobody felt right afterward. Sometimes I walk past the window and watch people moving through their days, and I wonder how many of them carry quiet detonations inside them, decisions made in a hush that change everything. I am left with the boxes, the echo of cutlery, and the knowledge that I reclaimed something I didn't know I could lose, myself. I should have suspected something when the house smelled of garlic and rosewater, and the table was set like a celebration. Emma's mother, Lila, moved with practiced warmth, bringing out courses as if rehearsing hospitality. Her father, Harold, poured a red wine into my glass with a smile that reached his eyes in a way that usually meant comfort. I told myself it was a normal Sunday dinner. I told myself we had time. Halfway through the main course, Emma lifted her glass and tapped it like a judge calling a session to order. Her voice was calm, the kind of calm that comes after a decision is already made. "I've been thinking about our future," she said, "and I've decided we need a prenup. Everything stays separate. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. Simple and fair." For a second my fork froze midair, and the clink of cutlery sounded obscene. I swallowed and smiled, the smile of a man trying to steady a small tremor in his chest. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk it through." Harold leaned forward, approving. "Smart move, Alex. No offense, but protecting assets is sensible." His voice wrapped around the idea like a coat. I nodded. No offense taken. I knew the language. Emma's smile curved in that way she does when she feels she's threaded a needle. Small, satisfied, almost private. I knew you'd see it, she said. You're so practical. She outlined it neatly. Separate finances, separate tax filings, and if the worst happens, each keeps what they brought. When I asked about the house, she softened the edge. We're both on the deed, she said. I'll put in 50,000, you put in 34, but once we're married it's joint. Equal split. The air in my lungs tightened. Her words were designed to sound reasonable. They landed like a calculation that left me exposed. She wanted separation when it benefited her and an equal cut when it didn't. Convenient timing, I said, feeling a small rush of something that could be humor or a blade. When did you decide this? Oh, I've been mulling it for weeks, she answered, casual as a weather report. My friend's divorce was a nightmare. I don't want that. Her fingers toyed with the stem of her glass, as if the story had been rehearsed. I watched her, heart thudding with a slow, cold realization, while I trusted she had been plotting. I took out my phone before I let the thought become a roar. Perfect timing, then, I said, because I made a choice, too. Her smile flickered like a candle in wind. What do you mean? She asked. Since you want everything separate, I said, steadying my voice so it sounded ordinary. I withdrew my name from the house deposit yesterday. Silence fell, thick and immediate. Lila's fork paused midair. Harold's jaw tightened as if a muscle had been pinched. Emma's face changed color in a way that belonged to people who realize they misread the map. What do you mean withdrew? Lila blurted before she could stop herself. I called escrow and backed out, I said. You hadn't deposited your share yet, and since we're not married, my money returned to my account. The 50,000 is mine. I showed the email confirmation like a small, shining proof. Emma's mouth opened and closed without forming words. You can't do that, she said finally, voice raw. We already sent money. If you've already paid for it, I said, then buy it yourself. Use your credit, your funds. Buy your house alone. The room tightened further. The wine tasted suddenly like ash. Emma's voice climbed. Panic fraying the edges of the plan she'd sold as wisdom. I can't get a $420,000 loan on my income. Then find a cheaper place, I answered, not cruelly, but with the clarity of someone who had stopped pretending at the table. We signed an agreement for contributions. I fulfilled mine. You didn't. I withdrew. The rest of the meal dissolved into the low static of people rearranging explanations into excuses. Lila's eyes shone with disappointment. Harold's mouth was a hard line, and Emma's composed mask had shattered into something frantic and small. I felt none of a triumph she must have expected to provoke, and none of a shame she tried to load onto me. There was only a strange, clean relief, like stepping out of fog into cold air, because the choice had been made, and, for the first time in weeks, it had been fully mine. Thursday was wild. They invited me to dinner, as if civility could stitch what had been ripped apart. Lila met me at the door with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Harold sat rigid, elbows on the table, as if bracing for impact. Emma's hands trembled when she placed the napkins. She kept stealing looks at me, as if measuring how much of me remained. You've got 72 hours, Harold began before the first course cooled. Deposit the 50,000 or the house is gone, and the earnest money is forfeited. His voice was tight with the kind of anger that wants to sound like authority. You're coercing us, Lila spat, standing as if to lean across the table. This isn't coercion. I said, my voice low and steady. This is me honoring Emma's stated wish for separate finances. Emma's face crumpled. I need that 50,000, she blurted, panic undercutting her composure. The loan is based on both our incomes. You're pulling your support after telling everyone you wanted separation. You want my money now, but protections later. That's exactly what you said at dinner, I answered. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. You said it, Lila heard it, Harold heard it. You made a choice. Harold's jaw clicked. You will fix this, young man. I won't, I said. Emma asked for independence. She has it. Emma gasped, then buried her face in her hands. They'll sue us, she whispered, voice shredded. They'll sue you, I said. My name is not on any documents anymore. Your signature is. You made the commitments. The table erupted into accusations, shouts mixing with plates rattling and silverware forgotten. Lila called me heartless. Harold threatened lawyers. Emma sobbed about her dream home and how everything had been taken from her. I stood, pulling my jacket on slowly, like a man removing armor he no longer intends to wear. Thanks for dinner, Emma, I said. Let me know what you decide about the house. You've got about 68 hours. I left before anyone could find a better word for me. My phone exploded. 39 texts in an hour, each one a different variation of despair or fury. I ignored them all. Later, a mutual friend told me Emma had been boasting to her circle about the brilliance of her prenup plan, how she'd shield her family's money while engineering me to shoulder most of the house. She'd called me a bank with a proposal. Banks don't close on command, but people do. News moved from sharp to ridiculous. Emma could not qualify for a $420,000 loan on her salary. She scrambled, banks, brokers, even sketchy lenders, but the best she could muster was $200,000. The house slipped away. The earnest money vanished with it. Her parents, furious, redirected their wrath at me. Harold came to my office Monday morning, face red with the righteousness of a man who had lost a bet on his own daughter. You cost us $35,000, he snarled, his math naming the gift and the earnest money together as my ransom. You saw the agreement, I said. I pulled out before marriage. I had the right to back out. You knew she couldn't afford this alone. You encouraged the separation. That's not what she meant, Lila protested, voice small now. It's exactly what she said. I slid Emma's message across the table. Everything's separate. Clean and simple. What's mine is mine. He reached for my phone. Security stopped him. Tuesday, Emma sent her friend Tara to mediate. We met at a cafe that tried to be neutral and failed. Tara opened with sympathetic words and closed with proposals that were performative rather than practical. A prenup, but keep the house joint. That was not a compromise. It was surrender dressed up as negotiation. She's willing to give up things, Tara said, earnest to the point of comedy. Like, sharing streaming subscriptions. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. So Hulu for $50,000. I said. The idea was so absurd it exposed everything beneath it. You're being unfair, Tara said. I'm being consistent, I corrected. Separate is separate. Tara flushed and fumbled for reasons. She loves you, she said, maybe to convince me, maybe to convince herself. She called you a bank with a proposal. The admission landed like an accusation. Tara couldn't meet my eyes. By Wednesday, Emma went public. She posted a story about her dream home being taken by a man intimidated by strong, independent women. The narrative fell apart in the comments. People remembered her posts about pulling together funds, about the split, about how she'd planned this. A co-worker bluntly asked, "Didn't you say you were getting him to fund most of it?" The post disappeared within 2 hours, but the screenshot lives forever. Thursday, when they invited me again, this time under the pretense of resolving things maturely, I knew what to expect. Lila tried to compose herself into gentility. Harold sharpened his questions into darts, and Emma's eyes were rimmed with exhausted performance. They asked for reconciliation, for a second chance to make the numbers work. "I won't be bullied into undoing the boundaries you asked for," I said quietly. "You set the terms. I honored them. If you want different terms now, you'll need to negotiate with the consequences." There was no dramatic reconciliation. There were only strained exchanges and the slow collapse of a future someone had rehearsed without asking the rest of the cast. I left the table with my dignity intact and a strange, unexpected quiet settling in my chest. No victory, no malice, just the clarity of a man who had chosen himself when the script had been rewritten without his consent. I suggested a neutral restaurant so nobody could accuse me of ambush. Gavin arrived with a laptop like a man carrying evidence to a trial. He opened a slideshow the way someone unfurls a map to someone else's ruin. "Here's our plan," he said, smiling as if the numbers were a kindness. "You and Hannah by the house," he began, voice syrupy with certainty. "You put in $50,000, we give $30,000, but ownership is 50-50. So you pay 62% and own 50. It's about building a life together while respecting Hannah's wish for separate finances." Diane reached for the soft weapon of guilt. "Don't you love her? Don't you want her happy?" Her voice folded around the question like a blanket that wouldn't warm any heart. I felt the warmth drain from my own chest. Love, to me, had never been an accounting trick. I wanted a partner. She wanted a financier. The word landed like cold metal between us. Hannah's face tightened. She had been holding something in for weeks, and finally let it fray. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. "Everyone knows you bailed on the house." "You embarrassed yourself with that prenup stunt," Diane snapped back. "It was for our protection." "No," I said, and the word was small and certain. "It was for your protection while you used my money." Her mouth opened as if to retort and then closed. There it was, the entitlement that I'd been trying to swallow. To them, my savings were a line item, not years of skipping trips, of doing the sensible thing while everyone else spent. To them, it was nothing because I had it and they wanted it. Gavin tried one last olive branch. "What if we repay you over time?" he offered, trying to turn rage into amortized kindness. "Repay me for what?" I asked. "I didn't give you anything for your share of a house we never bought." "The house we didn't buy," Hannah said, voice collapsing at the edges. "The one I couldn't afford." They stormed out, dignity folding like napkins into pockets. The walk home was the same cold air that follows a storm, sharp and cleansing. Friday a letter arrived from Hannah's lawyer. A paper accusation of $50,000 for detrimental reliance and breach of promise. I handed it to my lawyer. He read it, laughed for a solid 5 minutes, and then wrote back a clinic of legal truth. 1. No money had been exchanged between us. 2. Withdrawing from a purchase before marriage isn't a breach. 3. Hannah's own texts proved she demanded separate finances. 4. Detrimental reliance requires a reasonable expectation, and expecting someone to fund a house while demanding separation isn't reasonable. Haven't heard from her counsel since. Update 2. Things got ridiculous. Hannah spun a story that I'd manipulated her, sabotaged her dream home. What she omitted was the prenup ambush, the weeks of planning while I trusted. Her friends, the book club, even her stylist messaged me with moral outrage. I kept my reply succinct. She wanted separation. She got separation. Then she made a gamble and lost. She went to my mother. I braced for theatrics. Mom, a retired family court judge who'd spent a life reading people's worst moves in public, was not moved by sob stories. She called later, voice sharp with amusement. "That girl's a piece of work," she said. She wanted to protect herself while building a future with your money. Does she listen to herself? You're lucky you stayed calm. I've seen men lose much worse in my courtroom. Hannah didn't stop. She found a cheaper house in a rougher neighborhood and texted like nothing had happened. Found a sweet starter home. "You put in $30,000. I'll do $20,000. Fresh start. We can tour tomorrow." "We are done," I replied simply. "The weddings are canceled." Her parents arrived at my door that night with a realtor clutching listing pages like contrite hymnals. They marched through my living room as if retrieving an offering. "We can tour tomorrow," Hannah said, voice brittle with a mixture of hope and accusation. "We can make this right." "There's nothing to make right," I said. "We're over. The wedding's off. The house was never mine to give away." Gavin stepped forward, the edges of his face hardening. "Listen here, sir," he said. "You're trespassing. Leave or I call the police." Diane sobbed in a way that wanted absolution rather than responsibility. "We gave her that money for your future," she wailed. "You gave her money. What she does with it is her problem." The realtor, sweating the whole time, tried to escape the crossfire. Hannah grabbed her arm and said, desperate, "Show him the listings. This is real." I shook my head. The realtor bolted like a ship, leaving a sinking dock. Hannah lost it then. Tears became accusation. "I did everything right," she cried. "I was securing our future." "You were securing your future with my money," I said, and the clarity in that sentence felt like sunlight through winter glass. The room filled with the heavy, animal sounds of people unmaking plans, gasping, shouting, sobbing. I stood in the center of it and felt something odd. No triumph, no gloating, only the hard, cold recognition that boundaries, once stated, cannot be sold back for convenience. When they left, the silence that followed was not peaceful. It was a settling, like dust after an earthquake. I sat on the couch, watching my life rearrange itself into new shapes, smaller, truer. The boxes of wedding things in the corner looked less like relics, and more like evidence that sometimes the only way to keep yourself intact is to refuse to be part of someone else's plan. They left roaring that line. That's what smart women do. Be smart with someone else's money. And the words hung in the stairwell long after the slammed door. Neighbors came to windows. Building management called me about noise complaints. I sent them the security footage. 3 people forcing their way to my door, pacing the hallway, lingering like ghosts. Management issued Claire a trespass notice the next morning. The fallout blurred from petty to surreal. Claire tried to salvage the venue, desperately hoping I'd relent. She sent me an invoice for half the deposits, $18,000, like I was supposed to be the bank behind her theatrics. I replied with a single line I'd rehearsed in 1,000 small humiliations. Everything separate. Her text chain, demanding I pay, evaporated into the same void as our plans. Another $16,000 disappeared with non-refundable ribbons and cake tastings. Her parents had wired money thinking we'd patch things up. Instead, they'd thrown good cash at a ghost. Then the ring turned into a mythology. She refused to return it, claiming I'd humiliated her and therefore forfeited the right to ask for it back. I reminded myself the law in our state treats an engagement ring as conditional, a promise, not property. So no marriage, no ring. She still wouldn't budge. I got counsel involved. Her defiance lasted 2 days. When it came back, it wasn't the same diamond I'd bought. She'd swapped it. I'd had the stone appraised before I gave it to her. The appraisal after it returned was proof. Her parents threatened suit. I threatened charges. The real ring reappeared in 2 hours, delivered with a tremor and a silence meant to buy shame back into circulation. Karma, in ledgers and taxes, arrived in the form of gift rules nobody had thought to mention at dinner. That $30,000 her parents gave because they loved the idea of a grandchild, because they wanted to help, was a gift to her alone and over the annual exclusion. The IRS treats that differently. The little generosity cost them almost $40,000 in combined tax and penalties once the accountants did the math and shook their heads. Their $30,000 bought nothing but a lesson. Claire, who had expected to move into the house and give notice on her apartment, found herself back on her parents' couch, a temporary bed, and the scolding of adults who suddenly calculated consequences. She went loud on social media, posts about betrayal, about toxic men, about triumph over misogyny. But the internet remembered details she thought deleted. Screenshots of her posts about the prenup and the plan to get me to fund the purchase circulated in the margins. A dating profile a friend sent me declared she wanted a real man who isn't scared of a successful woman, and then listed unsubtle the traits she wanted in a partner: financially secure, generous, provider. Her bio mentioned prenups as a red flag she respected, but expected other people to ignore when it suited her. The comments were merciless. Somebody even wrote, "You want a funeral, not a husband." People laughed. People judged. I turned away from the noise. Tara, the friend who tried to mediate, apologized later with a face full of mortification. She hadn't known about the bank with a proposal comment, or that Claire had been quietly engineering a scheme to shield her family's money while capturing mine. I didn't want apologies. I wanted honesty that might have saved months of illusion. Instead, I got explanations that read like denials stitched into panic. The house? It sold. For $400,000 below asking. An absurd, almost cosmic twist. We could have had it. My $50,000 could have been planted into something real and beautiful. Instead, it became an investment elsewhere, compounding quietly while people who'd wanted my money learned how costly lessons can be when handled with pride. My mother, sharp as ever, only summed it up. She wanted a sponsor, not a spouse. She said it with the bluntness of someone who'd seen too many people confuse love with ledgers. "Thank God you saw it before the wedding," she added, like a benediction, and a wound at once. "I'm doing all right. I invested the $50,000. It's up 8%. Numbers that matter to accountants and not at all to the way afternoons feel. Dating isn't a priority right now. When I return to it, I'll look for something I should have looked for sooner. Reciprocity, not calculus. Partnership, not patronage. People ask if I regret it. My only regret is not seeing the pattern earlier. The warnings threaded through small comments, the easy assumption that I would pay, the offhand. What's the point of a boyfriend with money if he doesn't spend it? I mistook for jokes. They weren't. They were rehearsals. She wanted my funds, not my future, my assets, not my presence. Her creed had been simple. What's mine is mine. What's yours is ours. In the end, she got exactly what she demanded. Total, permanent separation. She kept her financial independence, unmourned, uncompromised, while I kept mine, intact and painfully shed of illusions. I don't gloat. I don't revel. I simply stand a little straighter because when the script of your life is being rewritten behind your back, sometimes the only power you have is to close the book and step out before your name is erased.